And we can see the camera angle here. We have Eric on the left, Jay on the right, and we can see the venue is starting to clear out a little bit as more players get eliminated. You know, it's Sunday night, time to go home and get back to work. But these players are sticking it out to the end. They have to get there. They're so close to being crowned regional champion and earning all those championship points and getting that prestigious victory.
Yeah, 150 championship points for the winner, right? So even if you came into the event with no championship points, you'd be already halfway there.
Yeah, and there we do see Eric, Jay on the right, both these players. Got to be happy that they've gotten this far, but still so much pressure here. And it looks like Jay won the coin flip. He is going first.
Yeah, so this is going to be huge. As Kyle and I were talking about, the opening coin flip matters so much. If the Trevenant deck went first, gets that turn one Wally for the Trevenant, it can just be absolutely devastating. So Jay, fortunate, won the coin flip, and now he needs to take advantage of it. Now he needs to play as many item cards as he can and get as many Night Marchers as he can into the discard pile.
Certainly. Starts off with that Ultra Ball. Great card. You always want to see that in your opening hand. We'll see if you can find Battle Compressor, maybe a Computer Search somewhere along the way. Anything that makes his turn take as long as possible. Usually when you're playing Night March against this deck, the longer your turn goes, the better it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We say Trainer's Mail, get the Dimension Valley there, which it's fine. Dimension Valley is going to be the only stadium card in play in either of these decks. It does fuel Phantom's Ascension for next turn, but between the Trevenant deck running 3 or 4 Dimension Valley and 8 energy, it's pretty likely that's going to happen either way.
And so, Kenny, I know you've played this Trevenant deck quite a bit. When you're playing against a deck like Night March, does your strategy change at all if you're going second with the Trevenant deck as opposed to going first?
I think mainly your main strategy is to just get the Trevenant on the board. I think if you're going second, just in general, the best thing you can do is try to get what I call the combo, which is where you start with a Phantom, you play a Phantom on the bench, you Wally's the one on the bench, and then Ascension the one active. Because again, one of the ways that Night March can beat you is by Lysandering something, and you want to go first. Obviously, that's just a huge advantage. But if you do end up going second, you really have to manage which Pokemon you have to play on your bench.
Definitely. And I think there are some little cards here, even when you go second with Trevenant, that make quite the difference. Bursting Balloon is that big one where, sure, they can Night March and knock you out, but maybe they'll get knocked out by those 6 damage counters from the Bursting Balloon. We also see sometimes the Trevenant player wins by just running the opponent out of energy. You can't play Puzzle of Time against Forest Curse, so things like Xerosic and Team Flare Grunt discarding double colorless energy can be a victory condition. You don't even have to knock anything out if you just get rid of all their energy.
Yeah, and Eric's deck is more focused on the energy removal section. It does not have the enhanced and crushing hammers like some of the lists do, but it does include the copy of the Team Flare Grunt and Xerosic, so it does have options for doing just that. And again, Puzzle of Time, a lot of the cards that Night March relies on cannot be played through Forest Curse.
And Jay's turn continues here, and with that Computer Search, I think he's going right for the Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick and Gallade. Gallade already on the discard pile, playing a Computer Search here, finding that Battle Compressor. I'm sure we're just going to see 3 Lampent hitting the discard pile to fuel that Night March attack, which does 20 damage times the number of Pokemon in your discard pile that have the Night March attack. Very simple, straightforward strategy. Discard all your Pokemon with Night March so that you can attack, do a bunch of damage.
Yeah, absolutely. Night March has been, not for its whole lifetime, but for definitely these last few months, it's kind of been, I think, the menace, mostly of Standard, but it has since been playing Expanded. I think, me personally, I predicted much. Is it a Maxi? Oh, it's a Maxi. I thought it was a Juniper with no cards in hand, but I predicted personally less Night March here in Expanded than usual. I was very surprised that it made up such a high percentage of the field, but there's an obvious reason why. It's just a very, very good deck.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that Night March wasn't as powerful and expanded as it is in Standard. I mean, it doesn't lose anything, but there are some specific cards in Expanded that people use a lot that can give Night March a hard time, such as Getsis. Seismitoad EX sees more play in Expanded than it does in Standard most of the time, but in the right environment, I mean, we've seen just how powerful this deck can be. If you can just start attacking every turn and just take knockouts, sometimes we see Night March win the game on turn 3, turn 4, because it just knocks out EXs every turn.
Oh yeah, I definitely think, as I've been saying, that Yveltal is the best deck in Expanded, but Night March is, in a way, just the most consistent. There's games with Night March where your opponent just goes Compressor, Compressor. I have 10 Night Marchers in the discard pile. I'm going to attach to it, knock you out. Oh, you knocked me out. Okay, I'll puzzle back. Like they can just be, they're so powerful and so aggressive, unlike any other deck in the game.
Yeah, and a few more things that make life difficult for Night March in Expanded. Trevenant, obviously one of them, tends to be a little more popular in Expanded than it is in Standard. And the card Eric just played, N. Right now, won't be very disruptive. Both players will shuffle in, draw a card for each of their prize cards, so 6 cards for each player. But as the game progresses, if you play an N against a Night March player and they go down to, say, 1 card in hand, they might not have that crucial double colorless energy to attack on the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of even just little things. For instance, Hypnotoxic Laser being legal and Expanded, I think, is, like, again, just a little notch that takes away from Night March and Expanded. Like, it's a good deck. It's obviously, you know, I expected to see some of it, but I did not expect it to be nearly as popular.
Yeah. So we do see the Ascension on Eric's side. That Phantom going to evolve itself into Trevenant. Also found the Bursting Balloon. So if Jay decides to attack with Night March here, both Pokemon will get knocked out. Trevenant will go to the discard pile from the Night March attack. Bursting Balloon will pop, hit the Pumpkaboo for 6 damage counters, and they will also be knocked out. So just one more way to help out against this Night March deck.
Yeah, and you see Eric did something that is very smart as the Trevenant player. He attached to the benched Phantom and then used the Dimension Valley to use Ascension on the active one. And that's just saying, you know, I don't know exactly how many Night Marchers are in Jay's discard pile, but it's very likely that the Trevenant will get knocked out this turn.
Oh,
and
wow.
he's just, what a combination of 2 cards. First, that Hex Maniac to turn off Forest Curse, and then a Tool Scrapper to get rid of the Bursting Balloon on the Trevenant.
Yeah, so Hex Maniac is one of those big cards in this matchup. You have to be fortunate enough to draw it at the right time, but when you do, it turns off all abilities. And Jay doing things in a great order here. He used his Premonition first, realizing that Hex Maniac would stop it, and then plays the Hex Maniac, turns off Forest Curse, get his item cards back. Saw he had Puzzle of Time in his top 5. Now he can play Trainer's Mail, and he has 2 Puzzle of Time. He can play this here, get a Hex Maniac back. This is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. See, this is what we were just saying. This is the kind of thing where, yes, you know, Eric did get the Trevenant out, but Jay went first. He did some work, and then that Hex Maniac that he now recurred with the Puzzle of Time is going to do even more work for him. The next turn, there's going to be no Forest Curse available, and at this point, I would say Jay is significantly advantaged.
Oh, definitely. Eric's only Trevenant is going to get knocked out. He could go like Trevenant, Wally into Trevenant Break, and that could be a little tough for Jay to hit for 160 damage to knock out the Trevenant Break. But right here, I think he has, he might have just enough 6 Night March Pokemon, nope, 7, in the discard pile to knock out this Trevenant. Take the first knockout, has a Hex Maniac in hand for next turn, has double colorless energy, has Gallade for Premonition. What more does he want?
Yeah, he just has the perfect setup here. I think one of the ways that Jay could, no, Eric is just going to pack it in. He sees the writing on the wall.
No need to theorize anymore, my friend. We are going to game 2. So Eric just sees it, says, you know what, this isn't even worth my time. It's not worth the effort. Sure, I could sit there and battle it out, try to find some 1% out for me to win this game, but you know, we're this far in the tournament, you're so tired, so fatigued. Let's just spend my energy in a game where I know I can win.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if you've never played this long of a tournament before, any kind of really high intensity, you know, over the course of a weekend, the mental energy definitely gets to you. You know, the mental energy is draining, and I think that's a smart move by Eric to just say, you know what, I have, you know, a 1% out, maybe I can win, but I'm not going to spend the next, you know, 10 minutes and however much mental energy on this situation.
Yeah, there's nothing like playing like 20 hours of Pokemon over 2 days. It starts to wear on you after a while, especially, you know, if you weren't able to sleep, you're a little nervous the night before, just got so much energy and adrenaline, you know, you advance to the second day. And it can just lead to some environments where you're like, man, I'm really tired. I've been playing so long. So I just don't want to expend the energy to try to win this game. Let's move on to a second one where I'm going to go first. My Trevenant can come out, and you won't be able to play those item cards, and I'll just regroup.
Yeah, and like we talked about, the Trevenant going first is just so huge. You know, it's very likely. I'm not a number scientist. I don't know the percentages here.
You're no Josue here.
Right. I cannot be Josue. But It's very likely that the Trevenant comes out again. In Expanded versus Standard, you do get things like Jirachi EX, which can play, use the ability, go grab a Wally, evolve your Trevenant right away. There's just so many more outs that you have to the turn 1 Trevenant, and it's just very unlikely that that the Night March deck can kind of react from there.
Yeah, both players have no basic Pokemon on their opening hand, so it's called the mulligan. You show your opponent your hand, and then you have to shuffle in and draw a fresh hand of 7 cards. Normally, if one player has a mulligan, the other doesn't, the other player will draw an extra card, but since both players don't have a basic Pokemon here, they'll just both shuffle in and draw a fresh 7, and hopefully we'll find some basic Pokemon and get on our way with game number 2.
Yeah, and you'd think, you'd think that if you just look at the deck, you think, oh man, it's kind of unrealistic to get the turn 1 Trevenant, but it's really not. You have so many outs. You have to think every level ball, every Ultra Ball turns into a Jirachi. Eric is only running 1 Jirachi, which is also what I've played the entire time, but there have been, I think Bob Zhang earlier played 2 Jirachi just for that exact situation. Yeah,
we do have the Phantom start for Eric. That's exactly what he wants to start with. Sometimes you can get slowed down if you start with something like Shaman EX or Jirachi EX. Makes it so difficult to get that turn 1 Ascension. And you can see Jay like, no, don't do this.
There it is.
Don't do this to me. But we see the level ball. Eric eyeing up the Jirachi EX. Stellar Guidance going to find that Wally, and we're going to see turn 1 Trevenant.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we were talking about. You get this level ball for the Jirachi, you Stellar Guidance for the Wally, and just, as long as that Jirachi is not prized, you have such a high chance of getting it. There's the Wally, even using the nice new Generations expansion one. And now, the thing is as we saw last game, there are outs for Jay. You can have things like, Hex Maniac, as we saw, but in reality, on his first turn, for one, he only has 1 Hex Maniac, and if he's using the Hex Maniac on his first turn to shut down the ability there, it's very unlikely that he has much else. That's a supporter for the turn.
Yeah, if you play Hex Maniac first, then you can't use Shaman EX either, so it really caps how much you can do on your first turn. I do see he has Lysander in hand. That's a little better on your first turn. You can Lysander out, Jirachi EX, and then still play your Ultra Balls, Battle Compressors, use Shaman EX to set up, but still limits how much you can do when you have to use your supporter on something besides drawing cards.
Yeah, and looking at Jay's hand, it looks like he has nothing else besides the Lysander. Like, if he can play the Lysander and be able to use items, but he has no items that will really impact the game. So unless the top of his deck is going to be pretty nice to him here, it might be tough.
Yeah, on Eric's side, though, everything's perfect. He gets a setup for 5 additional cards, Trevenant in the active spot, and yikes, like you said, this is not looking good for Jay. He's got Lysander, going to bring out Jirachi EX. He can play item cards, but Puzzle of Time, not exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, so Puzzle of Time is it's going to play 1 copy, the lesser used version of the ability on Puzzle of Time, but I think he put a Shaman EX on top, it looks like.
Yeah, and he's actually going to use the other Puzzle of Time as well. Usually you play both at the same time to get cards out of your discard pile, but Jay just needs to make sure he draws something on the following turn. He realizes he won't be able to use item cards next turn when Trevenant becomes active again, so get rid of this item card so I can set up for more cards with Shaman.
Yeah, exactly, and we see the Trevenant break come down for Eric, so as long as he can find a way to retreat this Jirachi, he's going to be in a pretty good position. It looks like an Ultra Ball coming down now. And in fairness, the Trevenant decks only run 8 energy usually. That's what Eric's running as well. And 3 of them can't even be attached to Jirachi, so it is possible that he misses here.
Yeah, he could find a basic energy or a float stone. One of those two could allow him to retreat that Jirachi EX. But yeah, it's certainly possible for him to completely miss here. And Jay could maybe get another turn of item cards. He'll draw the Shaman EX, set up for a bunch of cards, and yeah, this will actually be a really big turn, whether or not Eric can get Trevenant back into the active spot.
So here we see the setup for, it looks like 4 cards.
That Mystery Energy doesn't do it. He can't attach that to Jirachi EX. I think that Jirachi's stuck. Eric has a tough decision here. He has an N in his hand as the only supporter card. If he plays that, he gives Jay a fresh hand of 6 cards, which is something you probably don't want to do. But you got to weigh the options here. Is it better to give Jay the top card of his deck, which he has rearranged, and give him access to item cards? Or would you rather play N, get Trevenant, and stop the item cards, but give your opponent a new hand?
I personally think if I'm Eric here, I definitely play the N, mostly because we have seen Jay rearrange his top 3, but also because the Silent Fear is so huge here.
Yeah.
More so even than other decks. You're going to take a knockout here on the Joltik. You're going to be 1 hit away from knocking out the Phantom. Like, I think you just absolutely need to try and Silent Fear. And Eric agrees with me. He's going to go ahead and play that in.
Oh, I absolutely agree as well. Taking away item cards is priority number 1 right here. But I mean, the nightmare scenario is that Eric plays this and still misses the way to retreat Jirachi EX. So he's got to cross his fingers that he gets Psychic Energy or Floatstone or Computer Search, one of those to get the Jirachi out of there.
Sounds like he has about 7 outs now, and he does draw the Psychic Energy there and the Floatstone, actually.
All right, so Eric does find exactly what he needs. Unfortunate that he had to play that N in the first place, but now he has Floatstone, can put that onto Jirachi EX, take away its retreat cost, and it looks like he's actually going to retreat and go for the big Tree Slam.
Yeah, it's going to go for the Tree Slam. It's just kind of, it's putting more damage on the board, basically. It's not taking a knockout on the Joltik, but with Trevenant, it's really just a numbers game, and it's it can be relevant to Tree Slam. It does commit an energy to another energy to the Trevenant, which can be dangerous, but I think Eric just assumes that he's in a pretty favorable position right now, so I don't think he's too worried about it.
Definitely. Now, taking a look at what Jay has here, he really needs to find something. Puts a double colorless onto the Joltik. He can power up a big Night March for 20 damage. Actually, not a bad card to draw off your one setup card.
He just throws it off the top, too, just shows Eric.
Not bad, Professor Sycamore. So that'll actually put a couple more Night March Pokemon in the discard pile and make a Night March attack do, I think, 60 instead of 20, which isn't great, but it's better than 20.
Better than nothing. And it looks like Jay did draw another Professor Sycamore for the next turn, which isn't exactly, you know, I think he'd rather have that be a Hex Maniac or something like that, but it's still going to draw some cards. I think won't put any, actually put 1 Night March in the discard pile as well.
Yeah, and it's better than his alternative, which was, you know, not have a Sycamore.
Right, exactly.
At least now he gets to play the game. He'll have some options at his disposal. And, you know, one of the ways you can buy time against Trevenant is just attacking with Shaman EX over and over. I noticed that Eric has no bench space anymore, so he has no way to stop that Shaman EX loop. He doesn't have space for the Mewtwo EX that we usually see to stop that kind of play. So we could see a scenario where Jay just constantly buys time with the Sky Return.
Yeah, the only way I think right now for Eric to prevent that is the 1 copy of AZ he has. But that's one of the, you know, good strategies to use against Trevenant in the right situation, and this is exactly the right situation.
Yeah. So now we're back to Jay's turn. He's got a lot of cards he can't play because of Forest Curse. And then he has, another setup for, nope, 0 cards.
0 cards.
Yeah. He had 7 cards in his hand, puts down Shaman, and, can't draw any. But he will have Jirachi EX as well. Stellar Guidance gets him a supporter card here. So maybe another Professor Sycamore or even Hex Maniac if he wants it.
It looks like he's eyeing a Teammates right now.
That's another option. I would say Teammates not immediately useful, but it can set up for a future turn. You know, Teammates for maybe double colorless this turn, and then Lysander or Hex Maniac. Sky Return, and then next turn you can plan out your turn where you get rid of Forest Curse and then play a bunch of item cards.
Yeah, so it looks like he did decide to take the Teammates, and he's just going to immediately search his deck. I agree with you. I think that playing the Teammates indicates that he's trying to basically get whatever card he actually needs, whether it's a Hex Maniac or a Lysander, as well as a double colorless, just to kind of have it. But he looks like he actually took a Professor Sycamore with that.
Yeah. Maybe his hand just wasn't good enough for Hex Maniac. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot. He has like Tool Scrapper, Fighting Fury Belt. Not great cards that are great immediately. He needs things like Battle Compressor. He needs to take big advantage of that one turn where he gets all his items.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's just gonna kind of be his plan here. He has the Shaman loop sort of going now. Again, an AZ can solve that, and also N is also one of the big cards that can solve that problem for you. Just gonna shuffle Jay and Eric's hands back in.
Yeah, that N is pretty big. It stops that Shaman loop and also gets rid of the other card that Jay took off Teammates. So pretty disruptive, but it does affect Eric a little bit. He'll only draw 4 cards off of this, whereas Jay gets 6.
That's why N is a fair, balanced card, in my opinion.
All right, so looks like off these 6 cards, Jay at least found another double colorless energy, so perhaps he can continue this Sky Return loop, but I think every other card in his hand is absolutely unplayable.
Yeah, just the double colorless, and it doesn't even... He can't even really do the whole loop because he's going to have to set up that Jirachi now.
Yeah.
When he doesn't have the energy to retreat it, obviously can't play that escape rope, so things are not looking good for Jay. Let's just say that much.
Yeah, so we're going to see the Sky Return for 30 damage, and I mean, usually at this stage in a game, promoting a lone Jirachi EX with 70 HP left is a recipe for disaster, but there is literally no way for Eric to do enough damage to knock out this Jirachi, so it's actually very safe.
Yeah, it's totally fine. I mean, he has to put some damage on this Revenant, you know, get the Shaman back in his hand. I don't know if he can actually play his hand back down to a reasonable number to draw off Shaman, but that Jirachi is not going anywhere.
Yeah. Eric, on the other hand, continues his setup, continues to build on his lead, finds an Ultra Ball off this Professor Juniper, which will find one more Trevenant, and when you have this backup Trevenant ready to go, just feels like you're in a great spot. The first Trevenant still going strong. Still has 40 HP left, so it'll still take 2 more Sky Returns to knock that out. And yeah, you can see just the massive difference when Eric goes first as opposed to Jay. Just completely different games.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just a huge role. And it's also important to note that I think Eric has gotten actually kind of lucky that his first Trevenant is still around and doing damage. Like, even when you can lock your opponent out, a lot of the time your first Trevenant is just kind of toast. But he's been able to sit back, load it up. Even the second Trevenant now is not the break version yet, but does have 2 energy on it, which is huge. So he's in a very, very good spot. He's been very fortunate this game.
Yeah, but hey, when you're got your opponent under item lock, I mean, this just happens. There's so many times where you just get Trevenant and your opponent looks at their hand, they're like, yeah, you win. That's a good game.
And there's a knockout on the Jirachi. You're going to go ahead and do 20 damage to that Shaman, or 30 damage to that Shaman. This is kind of the last time, I think. Oh, yep.
Is he going to do the honorable thing, the Sky Return? Oh, no, he finds the Hex Maniac.
Actually has the Hex Maniac.
Wow.
All right.
That was not a bad top deck. His entire hand was unplayable, but now pretty much every card in his hand is ready to go. A bunch of item cards. He can play Battle Compressor, discard a couple of Lampent here. I'm not sure if he has Versus Seeker to get back Hex Maniac or Ultra Ball to get some more stuff, but Jay is just barely hanging on with every little thing. Whenever he's got like one last opportunity, he draws a card and he's like, oh, hey. That's not
there
bad.
it is. Yeah, I mean, he had, I think one of 2 cards really saved him there, either the Lysander or the Hex Maniac, and he got there, and now it looks like he has the Battle Compressor he played. He has 2 Trainer's Mails now, so he can absolutely set up a turn where he just kind of gets everything that he needs.
Yeah, now the only unfortunate thing for him is he's already played his energy for the turn, I think, so he won't be able to Night March or anything this turn. But maybe he's just content to, find another Shaman EX, go for a Sky Return, and keep going with that strategy. And then whenever it's convenient for him, he can drop down a Night March Pokemon and start attacking.
Yeah, exactly. Once he does end up knocking out the Trevenant break, then he has to be fearful of keeping up with the Shaman loop because Mewtwo can actually come out then. But at that point, he's already knocked out the Trevenant. He'll have a few more turns to kind of build things up and hopefully have a Night Marcher going. Yeah,
it looks like we do see Jason wins Game 1 over Trainer in the top 4 match there. So Jason 1 game away from moving on to the finals. We'll see if Trainer can pull that back. We'll have some more updates for you as those games progress. But still got this game going on. Jay plays that Hex Maniac, turns off Forest Curse on Trevenant, regains his item cards, and he's taking full advantage of it.
Yeah, gets the Versus Seeker for the Hex Maniac, which means he's going to be able to do a similar thing again next turn if he needs to. And then I think this is really, this is a pivotal moment in the match. This is really what we talked about as far as the Night March deck having a chance. And there's that second Shaman. Can't use the ability because he already played Hex Maniac, but that's fine. Just going to go ahead and hit for 30 and send up the other Shaman.
Yeah, one of the big downsides of the Trevenant deck is it doesn't do a lot of direct damage. Most of it's all spread out. Your biggest attack is actually 60 damage to the active. So when things like Shaman EX can constantly return to your hand and heal off damage, there's not a lot you can do. But there we do see the game changer. Mewtwo EX has that big side drive attack, which can stop Shaman EX from doing this.
Yeah, I think it was unfortunate that Eric put himself in a position where he had to AZ to be able to get the Mewtwo out. Perfect situation for Eric there would have been another N, and then drop the Mewtwo, just to get rid of the Hex Maniac he has in hand.
But we do have the double colorless going down, set up from Shaman EX, and ooh, those are some good cards if he can play Hex Maniac here. Gets an Ultra Ball and a Computer Search. Can certainly do some stuff with that.
Yeah, there's the Hex Maniac. So Forest Curse is no longer relevant. We see the first item card played is Ultra Ball. And I imagine a Night Marcher's coming in. Yeah, it looks like he's going to go for Pumpkaboo.
Yeah, might as well. You want to prepare in case that Mewtwo EX comes out and uses Side Drive. I believe Eric is at 3 prizes right now. Can't quite tell, but I don't know. We'll see. We got the Sky Return, Knockout, Shaman EX going into the active spot. And finally, that first Trevenant goes down.
Yeah, and, Trevenant lasts so much longer than it should have.
And maybe Jay can slowly start to push back in this game.
Yeah, maybe it looks like he's going to go ahead and Computer Search for a Psychic Energy. Going to go ahead and Side Drive for the Knockout. Oh, he only had 2 prizes remaining.
Never mind.
Yep, so that's just the game. I was going to say, wow, pretty bold of Eric to just Computer Search and show his opponent the card he got off of it with no fear, but that's the game right there.
All right, so Eric takes game number 2. We're tied up 1 game apiece, and you can see just the different sides of this matchup when one player goes first or the other. And now it'll be the pivotal game 3 to see who goes on to the finals here and has a chance to be crowned Madison Regional Champion. Kenny, now we're 2 games into this. Game 3 on the way. You think Trevenant can pull it off, or will Jay prevail with his Night March deck?
My heart says Trevenant. Eric is a good friend of mine. Trevenant is my favorite deck, but I think going first just matters too much in this matchup. You know, we did see, for instance, last game, Jay's opening hand wasn't very good. So that can happen again. You know, just going first does not guarantee you the win, but it's just such a huge advantage here. And winning that opening coin flip in the first game guaranteed that Jay would, if there was a third game, Jay was going to go first in it. So I got to say Night March at this point.
All right. Well, I guess we'll have to find out as our players shuffle up for game number 3. I'm just hoping we see one exciting game to close out this series. We've had 2 kind of lopsided games. That is how this matchup ends up playing out most of the time. One side either steamrolls or the other one does. But I'm hoping we see some excitement here.
Yeah, me too. I think that's kind of one of the things about Trevenant. We've talked a lot about this weekend how, you know, if the Darkness decks didn't exist, if Trevenant would be kind of too good. And that's sort of the thing, is that Trevenant presents these games that are kind of, you know, I like to call them free wins, where it's like, regardless of the matchup, regardless of what else is going on, just when you say you can't play item cards, you're going to win such a high percentage of games, regardless of anything else.
Yep, and we start things off. Jay has no basic Pokemon, so he's going to mulligan, shuffle his hand back into his deck, and draw fresh 7 cards. But that does mean Eric will start the game with 1 extra card, and every card matters. So I'm sure Eric will be happy to take that.
Yeah, I think the extra card just matters in this matchup more than most others. Just that could be a level ball, that could be a Jirachi. You know, most of the time, the extra card is sort of irrelevant, as a lot of decks are wanting to play Professor Sycamore early, and just, you know, it doesn't end up really mattering. But for Trevenant, it matters a little bit more.
Yeah, it can also give you another Phantom to put down, just so you can get more Trevenant going. But here we have the handshake. Game number 3 underway between Eric Gansman and Jay Young. Winner of this moves on to the finals, and kicking the game off with a bang, Professor Sycamore discarding a lot of Night March Pokemon.
Discarding 3 Night March Pokemon, it looks like, and also the Night March Pokemon that you want to discard, Joltik, whose 30 HP makes them very susceptible to that Silent Fear by Trevenant.
And Jay's turn is nowhere near finished. I see some cards in his hand that are quite good. Ultra Ball will find him a Shaman EX, I assume. And I also saw Computer Search in his hand, so we're going to see quite a long turn here.
Yeah, this is exactly what the Night March deck wants to do. He, you know, went first. He got the Miracle Sycamore there, discarding 3 Night Marchers, and now he's just going off with the Shaman. He has a Computer Search, so it's definitely not even close to over. We'll just do a Battle Compressor off of that.
Looks like he's playing the wrong card.
He meant to play the Battle Compressor there.
Yeah, puts down the Computer Search, meant to play Battle Compressor. I mean, the computer search was played, so they might make him play it.
Yeah, looks like what's happening.
He probably doesn't mind. He was going to play it anyway.
It doesn't really matter. It was going to get played eventually, and it's not like he was going to. Battle Compressor matters. Doesn't matter. It's fine.
Yeah, and finds another Shaman EX with that computer search just to continue his turn even more. We got Battle Compressor coming in. We'll probably see some Lampet go into the discard pile, and this is exactly what Jay wants and exactly what Eric didn't want to see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's just. I think this is even an above-average turn at this point. You know, getting rid of the Joltix, and now he's had Ultra Ball Computer Search as another Shaman, and you know, not only is Jay being able to put all these Night Marchers in the discard pile, but he's also just getting rid of all these items. You know, it's very likely that unless things go horribly wrong for Eric, that at some point Jay will be item locked. And another one.
And another one. Battle Compressor is at number 3 at this point. Well, 2 or 3, no matter what the case is. It's a lot of Night March Pokemon going into the discard pile, and that means a lot of pressure being put on Eric. Even though Jay can attack while he's going first, it's going to set up a big Night March attack for turn 2, turn 3, and on. And just makes it so Eric's going to have to set up so many Trevenant in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things that the Trevenant deck kind of relies on, is you're saying, hey, you know, I don't have the most HP, I can't do the most damage output all at once, but I'm going to lock my opponent out of items. They're going to be slower, right? Like I can afford to be a little bit slower, a little bit more plotting because they are. But when the Night March deck goes first and this sort of thing happens, when the Night March deck is operating on its normal axis and then you have to be the slow deck, it's not good for you.
Yeah, and Jay, with that Battle Compressor, says he has enough Night March Pokemon in his discard pile and just says, you know what, I'm going to leave it at that. He's going to discard a couple more item cards instead, knowing that he won't be able to play those in future turns.
He even has just a basically perfect hand right now. He has a Professor Sycamore for the next turn, but he also has an additional double colorless energy, which is going to be really important because that kind of is the bottleneck. You know, these decks are only running 4 double colorless, so like you said earlier, there is a situation that can happen where even if the Night March deck has a long first turn playing a bunch of item cards, he can eventually run out of energy. But with 1 on board already, and can basically guarantee a knockout's not happening this turn, and 1 in his hand, it doesn't seem like Jay's going to have that problem.
Yeah, so now it's on Eric. He has to get a bunch of Phantom down. I would say 2 is the minimum. He's done that. 3 would be ideal. He does have that Xerosic in hand to discard the double colorless energy, and that's just 1 of 4 gone now. Otherwise, not a very explosive turn. Just uses Ascension. Does get the Bursting Balloon onto Trevenant, though, so still a very strong turn.
Yeah, he's doing everything he can. Unfortunately, Jay had to discard 2 Puzzle of Time there, which, if he plans on breaking the lock, could be useful, but he's worth it for the Professor Sycamore. And you see he attaches the double colorless to the Shaman because he just does not want to lose his Phantump to that Bursting Balloon. He just does not want to engage with that thing at all. So it also helps to protect the double colorless energy. So he doesn't have the 1 on board that we talked about last turn because Xerosic got rid of it, but Jay's doing everything in his power to make sure that this Bursting Balloon does not hurt him.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Not only do you not lose a Pumpkaboo, save a double colorless energy, but you also do a bit of damage so that maybe you can deal enough next turn to knock out Trevenant Break.
Yeah, exactly. And Eric, for what it's worth, Eric is doing everything. This is, besides maybe he wants an energy on that active Trevenant there. This is basically everything you could want. He has 2 Trevenants, so it eliminates one of the possible outs to Forest Curse that Jay has, and Lysander even has a Trevenant Break in the active position. There's a Dimension Valley on the field, so he's definitely getting there. It's an uphill battle for him, but he's getting there.
Certainly, and I was just looking at Jay's hand before the end. It was going to be a bad time for Eric if he let him keep that hand he had, like Hex Maniac, Fighting Fury Belt, all of these cards that would have just put Eric in a terrible position, but N saves the day.
In fairness, it looks like Jay drew a double colorless and a Professor Sycamore here, so not quite as devastating as the hand he did have, but still not looking good. And he just top decked a Hex Maniac, it looks like, so never mind. He just redrew the same hand.
Not bad. Yeah, so he actually only had 6 Night March Pokemon in the discard pile. That was only dealing 120 damage. That's 10 short of knocking out this Trevenant Break. So getting the Hex Maniac, getting the Fighting Fury Belt onto Pumpkaboo means he can do 10 extra damage and actually get the knockout on Trevenant Break. Also gets the extra HP on Pumpkaboo, just a huge turn of events with that one top deck.
And this is when you know things. This is when you know Jay's confident, when he just goes Versus Seekers and gets the Hex Maniac, or gets the N rather than the Hex Maniac. Yeah, he's just not even concerned.
Yeah, that's a very interesting play going for the N instead of the Hex Maniac. But, you know, Hex Maniac isn't great if you don't have item cards to go with it. So maybe just take him back Draw Supporter instead.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar to the Professor Sycamore play that we saw last game where he's just...
Jay just took 2 prizes. Hopefully they get that fixed. He should only be drawing 1 off of that knockout. He took the 2 Lampent. One of those needs to go back.
Yeah, it looks like even though Trevenant Break is as powerful as an EX and as foil as an EX, yeah, it looks like they're taking care of it.
Yeah. So thankfully, Town Map shows us what his prizes were. So we know it was 2 Lampent, has to put 1 back. This actually happened a couple times when we did UK Nationals last week, where it feels like when you knock out Trevenant Break, man, you should be getting 2 prizes. I mean,
you've earned something.
Turning off your items, he's got 160 HP. How does he only give up 1 prize? But that's the reality of it. And this used to happen a lot when I used to play against Jason Kozinski, and I would have Safeguard Sigilif. And every time he knocked it out, he would go to take 2 prizes and be like, man, I worked so hard to knock that thing out. It should just be worth 2. Why not?
Yeah, luckily, thanks to Town Map and the power of our cameras, we can see nothing shady went on. We just put the one of the Lampents back, so that would be a devastating way to lose in a game that you're just so far ahead in.
Yeah. Now, I got to think Jay had a little bit of foresight here, taking the N out of his discard pile. He knows that Silent Fear will knock out 2 of his Pumpkaboo, and Eric goes down to 4 prizes. That means he can play N, disrupt Eric a little bit. Also, his Night March Pokemon count in the discard pile goes up to 8 if both those Pumpkaboo go down, so he can respond with a Night March knockout. So I think this is pretty well planned out by Jay, but Eric is actually in a pretty decent position given that he went second. He's got the Bursting Balloon. He's going to go down to 4 prizes. And if Jay wants to attack here, he's going to have to sacrifice his Pumpkaboo.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that Pumpkaboo, again, if he attacks, it's going to go bring Eric down to 3 prizes. Eric is going to need to focus on getting that Trevenant out next turn. It looks like this, again, if Jay attacks, this Trevenant will go down. But it's definitely anybody's game at this point, especially if you're right. For going second, Eric has definitely put up a hard fight.
I mean, Jay doesn't have any backup attackers. He's got Shaman EX on the bench, sure. But that only has 50 HP. I don't think... Well, Eric actually could play Wobbuffet and knock it out next turn, so Jay actually needs to find another basic here.
And it looks like he opted to go with the Professor Sycamore.
Yeah.
You know, he just recognized what was going on and said, I just need to draw more cards. I need to draw the full 7, discard all this stuff. And he has found Shaman EXs, but no other Night Marchers.
Yeah, and I think you have to bench Shaman EX here. You can't risk your lone Shaman EX with 60 damage on it already getting knocked out by a Wobbuffet with Psychic Assault. That would be a horrible way to get eliminated from the tournament. So even though you're not drawing any cards from the setup, you have too many cards in hand, take the knockout, promote another Shaman, and you know, Jay gets a prize, Eric gets a prize. Eric's in the lead, but the pressure's on him to get another Trevenant and keep this item lock going.
Yeah, exactly. If he does not get that Trevenant up, there's the Wobbuffet we talked about.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a Trevenant. So it's going to be interesting whether or not Eric decides to try to take a knockout with this Wobbuffet here using the Dimension Valley to reduce the attack cost, or if he decides, you know what, I need to keep this item lock going.
I can actually see it either way at this point. If you take the knockout with Wobbuffet and you go down to 1 prize, and Jay would need to have like Floatstone, Night March Pokemon, Double Colorless Energy, and that's just to knock out a Wobbuffet. Then you still have Trevenant ready to go. So I could see it either way. I do think continuing to take away item cards is important, but if you have Wobbuffet taking away abilities too, you can kind of limit your opponent's options.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards Wobbuffet here. I think that you're just so close to winning the game, and then even if Jay manages to respond, knock out the Wobbuffet, which is likely, you still have that Trevenant up to, you know, lock him for another turn, and while you try and get a Mewtwo for the last Shaman or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and even if you take the knockout with Wobbuffet, let's say that Jay responds with a Pumpkaboo, only has 60 HP. If you do find Mewtwo EX and 1 energy, you can X-Ball for 60 and finish off the game. So the more we're talking about it, the more I do like the Wobbuffet line of play, but we'll see if Eric feels the same way.
Yeah, it's also interesting to note that one difference, though, that Eric did make to the deck that his good friend Travis Nunlist, who ended up top 4ing the Seattle Regionals last week with the same deck, is Eric put in a second Wobbuffet. So that's kind of another alternate attacker. Won't be necessarily useful right away, but again, if a situation does come up where maybe a Shaman or a Pumpkaboo does take some amount of damage, that could definitely work in his favor.
Eric, though, opting to go with the Trevenant line of play, saying, you know, I just don't want to risk my opponent getting all these item cards. Perfectly fine. I do think it's going to make his path to victory a little, well, maybe not harder, but a much longer path to victory. Now we have 2 Shaman EX to go through. He's still got 3 prize cards to take. But he's going to play this big N, disrupt Jay's hand a little bit, and we'll see if Jay can continue to use Shaman EX throughout this disruption.
Yeah, and I think Eric just actually made an interesting play. He attached to the Trevenant, which I think I would have liked to have saved that energy for potentially a Mewtwo this turn, because it does look like Jay is on the kind of Shaman loop plan, and so the extra damage isn't really going to matter. And you know, if Eric can find a Mewtwo and drop an energy on it, he's just 1 energy away from a potential side drive.
Yeah, at the same time, I mean, if you N hit for 60 and Jay does not find a double colorless energy to use Sky Return, you're actually going to get to knock out that Shaman EX in 2 hits. So playing the odds
Come on,
a little
Kyle,
bit.
they always have the double colorless, you know that.
Well, it might not be the case this time, as Jay uses Stellar Guidance, and that's it.
I take it all back. I take it all back.
Eric Gansman wins and moves on to the finals here at the Madison, Wisconsin Regional Championship. Jay doesn't find the double colorless energy, sees the writing on the wall, and says, good game. Jay is a Trevenant player himself, he said. And, he just knew exactly what was going to happen. Congrats to Eric. Unfortunate for Jay that his run ends just not finding the right cards at the right time, but both players, great accomplishments thus far.
I should have gone with my heart, Kyle. You asked me what deck's going to win. What deck's going to win? I said, you know what?
No faith.
No, I have no faith. I am so embarrassed. I said, you know, I'm going to use my mind this time. Most of my life, I've used my heart, but I'm going to use my mind, and I was wrong. I'm never using my mind again.
Yeah, so congrats to Eric on the big victory. Moving on to the finals, we'll have one more match waiting for you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have an interview with Eric, and then stay tuned for the finals as well.